If you're wondering what to expect during the final stage of your Mexican residency process, this video is for you. I completed this final step at a Mexican immigration office just a couple of weeks ago. And in this video, I'm going to tell you everything that I learned and what to expect to make your appointment at a Mexican immigration office as stress-free and easy as possible. So, let's dive in. This final step in the residency process that I'm talking about in this video is commonly known as Canje. So this happens after you already get your visa permit from a Mexican consulate in the US. So after you do get your visa permit, which looks like this, a sticker in your passport, you have 180 days to enter Mexico to complete Canje at a local INM office. Now let's just clarify two words here. The first one is Canje. So Canje basically means exchange in Spanish. And it's called that because you are exchanging your unofficial visa permit sticker to the more official visa card. Once you get this, you are an official Mexican resident. The other word to clarify is INM. So INM is an abbreviation for the immigration office here in Mexico. And that is where you're going to complete the final stage of your Mexican residency process. It stands for Instituto Nacional de Migración, but of course you'll just know it as INM. So many different cities and towns all across Mexico have an INM office, so you'll have many places to go to complete your Canje process. Here's what to expect for Canje. So while this process doesn't necessarily have to be difficult, there are a few stages or steps that if you mess them up or make some kind of mistake, it could absolutely terminate your residency application. So pay attention here. As I mentioned, you have 180 days after getting your visa permit in the US at a Mexican consulate to enter Mexico to finalize Canje. So your visa permit will have an expiration date. And if you don't enter Mexico within those 180 days, it could terminate your visa application. Number two, enter Mexico the right way. So when you are entering Mexico that first time to take care of the Canje process, do not enter as a tourist. Let the immigration agent know that you are entering for Canje and they will stamp you appropriately. If you don't do this and you do enter as a tourist, guess what folks, once again your visa application could be terminated, so really pay attention to this. Number three, make an appointment at an INM office. So once you do get stamped in as Canje, another 30-day timer starts ticking, and that is 30 days to make an appointment at the INM office. So just to clarify here, that means that you have to make an appointment and not necessarily attend an appointment. However, if you do not make the appointment within 30 days, or for whatever reason you have to leave Mexico before finalizing your residency process, once again, your residency application could be terminated. So to make the appointment, there is an online portal that you'll get a link to when entering the country. We'll also put it in the description. It is completely in Spanish and potentially a little bit difficult to navigate. Another way to book your appointment is to go through an immigration facilitator here in Mexico, and that is something that we'll talk about a little bit in more detail later in the video. Number four, go to your appointment. So this is when you actually have to show up at the INM to complete the process. There are some additional paperwork to process. There's also a payment that you'll make of about 5,570 pesos or approximately 270 US dollars. You'll also do your biometrics and take some photos. And if it's not too busy, then you will leave that day with your residency card. And finally, step number five, celebrate that now you are a Mexican resident. Bienvenidos. Guys, if you're going through the residency process, I know that it can feel overwhelming, but to make you feel more at ease and more confident, I created a 5-minute residency cheat sheet to make everything just so much easier and more digestible. So this 5-minute cheat sheet just goes through all the steps that you need to take to go get your Mexican residency the easy way, and it'll keep you on track and also help you avoid costly mistakes that could cost you time and money. So if you want to find that, just head to the description to get the link or look at the first pinned comment. It'll be there as well. And now, let's get back to Canje. This can be thought of in two different parts. One is preparing for the timeline and the other is preparing for the actual appointment. So regarding the timeline, remember that once you get your visa permit from the Mexican consulate in the US, that you have 180 days to make it down here to Mexico to complete Canje. If you think that it would be tricky for you for whatever reason to come here within 180 days, don't even start the application process because again, if you don't make it here within 180 days, your visa application can be terminated. So a general tip for that is just creating a timeline for yourself so that you don't mess things up just by jumping the gun. Next, the final step of your residency application that happens at the INM office it could be difficult and potentially bureaucratic, and that is because everything at this stage is happening in Spanish. So if you make any mistakes, then it could definitely cost you time and potentially even money. But to make this part of the process 1,000 times easier, we recommend going with an immigration facilitator. And this person is basically an immigration expert based here in Mexico that helps you through the entire process. So they'll make the appointment for you, they'll finalize the paperwork, and just make sure that everything is smooth sailing and that you get your residency card. They cost between $200 and $250 US. And if you don't speak Spanish, then we 100% recommend them. So if you do go with a facilitator, the only thing that you really have to remember is just to show up to your appointment a little bit early, bring a copy of your passport and a copy of your visa permit. So that's the sticker within your passport, and just show up with a good attitude. If you don't want to go with a facilitator for whatever reason to save the money, or if your Spanish is on point, then you have to do everything yourself. So you'll have to make the appointment through the link that we have in the description, finalize the paperwork. Even if you do speak Spanish though, I think it's still worth it to spend the extra money. So Aimara, my wife, is a native Spanish speaker, but we still decided to go with a facilitator just for peace of mind. And again, even if you do make the smallest mistakes on your application and potentially you're in like a busier I&M office, say in Mexico City, Playa del Carmen, wherever, if there's mistakes, they could send you out and you'll have to just kind of restart the process, and it could be a total pain. So just a couple of things for everyone to remember. The English levels in these offices is typically pretty minimal, and also everyone is pretty busy. So my experience in Merida was that everyone was very friendly and polite, but as you can imagine, a government office, that may not always be the case. And a final tip for using an immigration facilitator, once you kind of know the date that you will be entering Mexico, make sure to let them know so they can try to make you an appointment ahead of time. Don't just come into Mexico, hang around the beach for 2 to 3 weeks, and then all of a sudden decide that you're ready for your appointments. These offices can be very busy, so help them help you. Okay, so we talked about what to think about when completing Canje and kind of how to prepare, but now let's talk about what to expect on the day of your appointment. So this is how it goes. You have an appointment date and time, and it is good to show up to your appointment a little bit earlier. If your facilitator is great, like mine was, then they will already be waiting for you. They'll ask you some basic questions to complete the paperwork. So your height, your weight, the latest education you completed in your home country, the work that you did. None of the answers to this actually matter, but for whatever reason, they needed to input into their system. And then once that is done, your facilitator will kind of give you the rundown of what to expect once you do go inside the office. So for my case in Merida, they kind of let in different groups of people at different times. So there was like a 10:30 group, an 11 a.m. group, 11:30, etc., etc. When they do bring in the groups, at this point, it is kind of good to be first in line because it is first come, first serve. And then you check in with a QR code that your facilitator would have printed out for you. And once you check in, they will know that you're there for Canje, and they will send you, in my case, to the back of the office where everything's kind of happening. So they'll give you a number, and at this stage, it kind of looks like a DMV in the US. So it's different I&M agents working at different computers, each with like a number above their computer. And you'll just kind of wait there until they call your number. When they do call your number, you'll go there and present them with the paperwork that your facilitator gave you. So there's very little interaction with you and the I&M agent. There's no real questions asked. It's just they take the paperwork and they put everything into the system. They'll call you back up, and this is when you have to make the payment of 5,570 pesos. In my case, I could pay with credit card, and I think that's typically the case. If everything is fine and everything's processed normally and there's no questions, they'll ask you to sit down again and give you a different number. And this means that you're moving on to the next step, which is biometrics. So for biometrics, in my case, I was given a different number and called back to a different room, and then they process your fingerprints, they take a digital signature, take some photos, and then basically it's ready to go, and they're printing your Visa card and you'll be all set. So I got very lucky for my appointment in Merida that it wasn't so busy, and everything took, I think, an hour and a half, maybe a little bit less. In busier offices, again in Mexico City or Playa del Carmen, it's not necessarily guaranteed that you will leave with your residency Visa card that same exact day. But overall, I think everything is a pretty painless process, especially if you go with an immigration facilitator. And hopefully, if you're like me, you'll walk out with the immigration card or residency card that same day. And now let's summarize with some common issues and just some tips about the Canje process. So one of the most common issues is finding a reputable immigration facilitator. So the way that we did this is that we used Google Maps and went to Merida and searched for immigration services. And then you'll get a list of different immigration facilitators and immigration attorneys. We just contacted 3 that had the best reviews, and one was definitely just more proactive than the rest. So we went with her and she was awesome. Just remember that communication with facilitators is typically over WhatsApp, so just get used to that. And next, make sure that you don't leave Mexico the same day that you get your residency card. This is because it could take about 24 hours for the system to kind of upload and refresh everything and make things official. So if you remember, if you do leave Mexico before completing Canje, your residency application could be terminated. So don't risk that and just hang around for 24 or 48 hours. And finally, if you do complete Canje in a state or region within Mexico where you don't intend to live long term, just know that you will have to process a change of address at the local INM office where you do plan to live whenever you do move there. If you don't do this, then you could risk getting fined. So don't do that. But all in all, as you may have noticed, this is a pretty easy process if you just take things step by step, and especially if you go with an immigration facilitator. And if you want to make everything about the residency process so much easier, simpler, and less stressful, make sure to head to the description or that top pinned comment to download your free Mexico residency cheat sheet. And if you want to see what it's like to go through the interview process at the Mexican consulate in the US, you can watch this video next. There's a ton of good information. And remember guys, if you have any questions, always leave them in the comments. We're very happy to help. Gracias.